Good morning, Highpoint, and good morning, everybody that's coming in virtually for Designer Discovery. We are here this morning with Monique and Patricia from Aloka. And I don't know if anybody that started following us early on noticed that we did a Instagram Live with Monique at, I guess, at your home, correct?
Mm-hmm.
At his home, and got to see a bunch of his textiles. And we had so many requests for more information on Aloka that we decided this was a must stop here during our Highpoint time. And so we came on over here and we're in their beautiful space over in the Cisco building. And we're just gonna kind of show you guys a little bit more, tell some stories about the textiles and about the relationship between Monique and his father as they travel to India to find these amazing textiles, and just hear more about the story. So, hi. Absolutely. So, how's market been going? Let's start with that.
Market's been good. A lot of virtual, a lot of activity, and so it's obviously a little different, but I think it's actually been pretty productive. So from that standpoint, it's good. And I mean, overall, everything feels pretty busy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good. Yeah, it's been good, and reception has been great. So.
How are you guys? Are y'all doing a lot of your appointments virtually right now?
For the most part, yeah. And we'll get everything here, especially like in the Cisco building, it's all by appointment only. And so if you don't, then we basically want to make sure someone is either ourselves, or if you're coming to see Cisco, someone's with you as you go through. So it's been good, and it's been safe. So that's great. Yeah.
Do you feel like it's been hard for people to really get a sense of these textiles because they can't touch them and feel them? Because, I mean, like I said, I've watched you guys virtually, and the textiles are amazing and they're gorgeous virtually, but there's nothing like seeing them in person. And so, do you feel like that's been difficult to kind of relay the...
In some cases, maybe, but I think, it's one of those things, like we have a lot of folks who we've done business with already coming back to us this year, so that part of it, it's once they know, so it's easy. And the thing I always tell folks is, like, you can see these pieces actually photograph really well, they show well on video, so we have that advantage. Like, one thing I know with furniture that we were talking to some of the reps at Cisco is they're having to oversell because folks can't just come sit on the sofa, right? So there's like a different, there's a little bit of a different experience there. But for us, like, it photographs well, it's great, you can see the texture, we can talk about the layers of the fabric, and people can really get it. And then, it's one of those things where obviously it's like, well, just buy it and see. Like, if you have a question, like, order a piece, see what you think, and then from there you can let it happen. And that's been fun.
It almost allows the customer to experience the story and take that all in before actually like feeling the product, because it's so much to learn that it's kind of overwhelming all at first.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the story a little bit, because I think that that's one of the things, based on the first live that we did with you. The story is, I think, what was so intriguing to the Designer Discovery audience, and it's what they latched onto first. So can you just kind of highlight that again, just the relationship between you and your father and your trips to India, and how you even came up with this idea?
Yeah, sure. So I guess we'll start with the material. So the material's interesting. It's I'll just grab one so we can take a look. These are all 4 pieces that are made from saris. So saris are like the traditional dress that's worn in India. And so, and most of our pieces we've come to find are about 60 to 80 years old. And they just layer them up and sew them. They're all hand stitched, and some pieces are quite heavy. Like, this is a heavier piece, and you can kind of, that's a little hard to translate, but it's definitely a lot heftier than some of our other pieces. But we've seen pieces that have 6 or 7 layers of saris. We've seen pieces that have up to 20. And so, like, there's a big difference in like range and variety in the product that's available. And so we love it for that. I mean, it's also a super durable product. It's lasted a long time. It's not new production, which was pretty important to us. Like, when we were thinking about what to do, there's a lot that you can do and make new, but there's a lot of cool, really great things out there already that if they just have a little bit of care and attention paid to them, they could last another 15 or 20 years, which is, call it sustainability or whatever you'd like. There's something about that like earned beauty aspect that was really intriguing to us.
Mm-hmm.
So the material's great. It's, again, great for upholstery. We went through a lot of pains to figure out how to soften it and clean it up properly, because as you can imagine, when we go and buy, we might sort through 10,000 pieces, and they're in bales, and they might have been sitting in a warehouse for 6 or 8 months, so they're collecting a little bit of dust, and it's India. So it's like naturally just the environment's a little different out there. And so for every 10,000 we might take like 100.
Wow.
And so we're being really discerning, and it would be really easy to just call someone and say, hey, like, we want to buy a lot of 2,000. Now it could pan out well, 70% of your goods might be great, but then you'll end up with 30% that you're just not really interested in, and then you're trying to figure out what to do, and inevitably you've kind of created more waste for yourself, and you're not able to really do service to the product. So I think it's worthwhile for us to travel out there and do the buying trips ourselves. So we know exactly what we're getting, but we're also able to really manage quality at the purchase point, which is just as important as anywhere else through the supply chain.
Well, and it really puts you in that position of truly being the creative director of Aloka when you're there and you're actively deciding which ones you want. Do you already, when you see it, do you already have a vision of whether or not you want that to be a throw or a pillow, or kind of in that moment? Or are you seeing things and knowing?
Yeah, but there's definitely pieces where, like, we'll start pointing out at the beginning, we're just like buying, right? And then as we started like tightening up what we were doing and how our approach was, you immediately start sorting in your head, right? So it's like you see and you're making 3 or 4 different piles because you're like, I know that's going to be overdyed, I know that's going to be block printed, this is definitely going to be for pillows. Or it's like, oh, there's a big hole in that piece, but the rest of it's great. So let's take it, we'll turn it into pillows, that's fine. So we're not letting like some of those like superficial damage issues bother us too much, because we've figured out the way to be able to use more of the goods. So yeah, like we have now that method is in place, which is great.
Well, I know you've mentioned to me that this is a trip that you and your dad always take together. So tell me about you and your dad, kind of that decision to start doing this, to get into this business, and what's the history there behind that?
For sure. So my dad was involved in the home textiles industry for almost 30 years.
Okay.
So I grew up in like this world, in this industry. So like even for example, Cisco, someone we met in 1996 or 7. And he was, I believe the story is, he was looking for space here. Dad was in one of the main buildings and was ready to figure something out. And they were introduced through another mutual friend, and we ended up sharing space at what is now the Bobo building.
Okay.
So Cisco had the first 2 floors, and we had the third. And in high school, I used to work markets for the family business, so I would come and set up here. So we had like that long story.
Yeah.
And so when we decided to go down this path, like, A, my dad and I wanted to do something together, so it was great. And B, this is a space that we both had a passion for. He had a lot of deep experience there working-wise, and I grew up in the space, and so that was a very compelling reason for us. But also, I just think we found something that made sense, right? So when we talked, he was like, I have this idea, we kind of worked through it, we sorted out like what all we could do, and we just kind of went. And so, yeah, it's neat. And it's great. Being able to work with your parents it's a really interesting experience. And
Special moment.
yeah, and it's a good thing. You get close to people in a different way when you work with them.
Yeah.
So I think it's been really great to do that.
Let's look at some of the other pieces.
Cool. Yeah, so just so y'all kind of get the lay of the land. So this is a piece that we might do, that we would sell as a one-of-a-kind piece. So we haven't really done any of the like overdying or block printing to this. We've softened it, we've cleaned it. That happens to every single piece that we buy. Because first and foremost, we wanted these to really be more seen as quilts and less as floor cloths. And so that like softness piece is mission critical, right? To
It's so soft. Like, I just want to.
Yeah,
and
that's the idea. It was
It's
like,
amazing.
what can we do? And so we were also trying to be mindful. So it's a process that's using vinegar as the primary component, which is great for brightening, for refreshing. It also helps get some of the smell out, and it softens really well. So that's great. So
But it's not too heavy. I mean, it's not like it's a heavy floor covering feel.
Yeah, correct. Like this piece that we
You
just
would
had,
use this
this
as
is
a
like
blanket.
the heaviest, one of the heavier pieces that we have. But most of them, are thinner.
Yeah.
And so it's again like about on average probably 9 to 12 layers of saris, and if you know sari fabric, it's super thin. So even putting 10 of them together is not creating like a huge weight. So the two kind of options we have. So in these bins right here, in the troughs we call them, these are all one-of-a-kind pillows, and so we'll design them and keep them as pairs so that, you know, A, they make sense, and B, you can kind of see how you might decorate with them or how you might merchandise them in the store. But they're still different, you know, so your stitching pattern's different, and you have a little bit of uniqueness in every piece. But then also, you know, you still kind of see how something would come together in a room.
Beautiful.
And so, like, if there was an existing hole or something in the piece that was the floor crawl, the family would, you know, patch it. And then it adds more character to the piece, and it's more living.
Yeah, exactly. And
Material.
like, so the patches are great. And so there's two kinds. Like, there's some patches that have probably been put on at some point along the way, and then some that are newer. Like, this is a newer patch. That's something that we would have added. So we saw a piece, there's a hole in it, and so we just patch it. And so, you know, it kind of becomes new again from that standpoint. So that's all the one-of-a-kind stuff.
I'd love to see this.
Yes.
As you're holding,
sure.
is this kind of how you guys build?
So we have been collecting a lot of our scraps, in particular lately with all of our pillow producing, but just to like cut it apart and see how the piece is made. This piece, I think we counted to be 12 layers that day we counted. And it's more of a thinner piece. But so what you do is, and excuse my nails, but my manicure, but so that's one layer. Then you have a different fabric, then another fabric, then another fabric.
Oh, and then they just all build to this gorgeous piece.
Yeah, and it wears out. Like, over time, what you're seeing here is one layer kind of
Blending into the next.
blending into the next. And so, like, this piece in particular, this was probably the side that was on the ground, and this was facing up. And so you have some of the traction, but not as much. But then on here, you definitely see where there's been wear and tear.
Yep.
And it's cool. I mean, like,
Well, it would be hard to tell, I mean, even which side is better. I mean, they both are so unique.
That's one of our number one problems.
we don't, yeah, it's hard
People
to pick sides,
want
right?
to know which side is up.
Well,
or you guys, and when you're trying to do
When
pillows
we
and stuff
are
like that.
trying, and some are more
We've
so
even
deep
had
in
pillows
there,
where, like,
but
we'll cut it, we'll sew it, and then we'll turn it inside out. You know, maybe 2 weeks later, and we're like, oh, you know what? I should go back and
change
go
it.
this way.
Uh-huh.
So it's nice though. It gives us an opportunity to really like play and test and feel.
And change things out.
And yeah, you
Yeah.
can switch.
Show me some of the hand blocking. You've been talking about that.
Yeah.
I'd love to know a little bit more about that process. And
For sure. So, like I said, this is all the one of a kind.
we're getting blown out here with the light. Hopefully everybody can see it. Okay, good.
Cool. And then right up here, so these 6 colors are our collection line.
Okay.
And so we can over dye, we pick our colors, we run through all the testing for that, we design all the blocks ourselves. And we have just created these color stories that like bring a little bit of consistency, not a little, a decent amount, right? Like, so you can see how the blues all work together. Now
Absolutely.
you'll have some difference in tone, some difference in how the dye takes hold and how the block takes hold because of the inherent nature of the piece. But in general, like, you kind of put it together and you see that, okay, like, this is definitely like a blue range.
Right. Right.
And there's, 10-20% difference. But I love that. I think that's kind of the point is
Absolutely.
someone can come and say, okay, I'd love to order, 10 of these pillows and 14 by 20 for my store. And
Right.
we'll say that's great. And what you might have is like this stitching, this is inherent in the piece, this is inherent in the piece, so you'll have some differences. But it's great. So you have something that works well in the store, something that can be sold and reordered, which for us obviously is awesome.
Yeah. Because every single piece is different, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you have that kind of consistency piece, but also a little bit of uniqueness, which I think is fun. So we kind of joke around about the whole sum of the kind idea. But that's kind of it, right? Like, it makes sense,
Yeah.
it comes together, but it is not like entirely produced, but it's also not entirely produced.
Yeah.
And so we have these 6 colors, and there's 3 different print options, 2 for the pillows and 1 for the quilts in the back. And then on some of the pieces, all we do is over dye, and we don't print, so we call them tonal.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah. Like, just for an example, like here's a really great piece that we dyed in a color that we call Midnight.
It's gorgeous.
And this is one of those things, like you were saying, do you have like a process now as you're buying? Like, this is definitely one where we're like, this would look really great when we dye it in blue.
Okay.
And so, because we found that like the patches all end up coming out really nicely, so when you have a lot of color happening, like the blue tends to work really well. And some of the other darker colors have that same mentality, and then the backside for you.
And that's something that Monik makes his decision while he's picking and choosing the quilts and laying them apart, like based on their undertone color, what color would go best with them,
Yeah.
and then he puts them aside.
Correct. So it's like, we can't, there's so much we don't know about this product, right? Like I know for a fact that given their age, they're going to be mostly cotton, but there's some that have some synthetic yarns that were put in at some point along the way, so they're not taking the dye.
Okay.
And so as we're looking through, we'll make those calls. So to Patricia's point, like for the yellow, we knew, okay, like yellow is probably not, it's probably going to work best with pieces that are light. Because the color, the dye is only going to take so far, and we need to, try and achieve consistency. So that's how we started sorting things out ahead. When we have darker pieces, we know we can run on the darker side. So that's like a general idea, but it really is just a matter of like looking through each and every piece, and we'll make piles, and we'll say, okay, like this feels good, this feels good, this feels good, and you sort of just run that process down. And it's interesting. The block printing, something we learned about block printing is that during the monsoon months when it's really humid in India, it's difficult to block print because the dye doesn't fix to the fabric. So
Wow.
it was something that we just did not even consider, and someone told us about it at the factory. And
Don't block print during monsoon season.
yeah, and I mean, it's like, well, you can, but the result is going to be different. And so we tested through that and kind of arrived at the idea that it's best to do it during the winter months or the off months when it's not super humid.
And even down to like the percent of darkness or richness of each tone, like the double tones. It's been sort of like an experiment trying to figure out what color or what percent darker we want to print the block on that shows the best with the material.
So what is the timeline from when you guys, you go to India, you find your saris and what you want to use, and then from that point to right here in the showroom, kind of what is your timeline from start to finish on these?
So in a normal year, it's probably, if I'm going and buying, I can have something here that's like ready to go. We do all the cutting and stitching in Atlanta, so we get just the raw material. It's probably like a 3-month process. So we'll go fly, we'll buy, and then we'll go and sort. We'll do all that in one trip, and we'll get that ready. Then, it'll take 4 to 6 weeks for all the processing to happen. If it's one-of-a-kind stuff, that's obviously a little shorter because all we're doing is, kind of getting it all freshened up. And then if it's the overdye piece, then it runs into a little bit of a production run. So yeah, 4 to 6 weeks plus our time out there. So I'd call it, 3 months or so. Everything right now is, kind of a little touch and go, but otherwise it's pretty.
But it sounds like you're hands-on from start to finish. So you can really control your.
Well, and that's kind of it's not super simple to create like a very systematic process with something that is so one of a kind in its nature, right? So if we're going through all the trouble to like pick every single piece, at that point, why not? Like then we just kind of stay a part of that process the whole way through, and it allows us to get to know the material really well, and also have a better idea of what we're going to get out of it. But also just like keep your hands on it at all times, which I think is important, and to not let go of like what is effectively like a hand touch or a handcrafted feel. So
Right.
I like that part of the process.
We'll try and develop like some kind of like system in the morning, and by lunch we're like, oh, it won't work. Because it's like there's so much uniqueness in every single piece. I did pull this as an example from the front of a quilt and a back of a quilt.
I mean, totally different.
Totally different.
Totally different. And this is in your one-of-a-kind
Yes.
bin.
Yeah.
And usually the size of the pillows are pretty much determined by the overall size of the quilt, and we try to just get as much yield as possible out of each piece.
Do you guys do any kind of custom where a designer might call you and say, I need this color tone, I need these sizes,
Yes.
and do you guys do that and work
Yes.
directly with the designers to create something?
Yep, and we'll do
Fantastic.
that. We'll definitely do custom with
custom pillows and all of that, no problem. If there's a piece you see and you're like, oh man, I'd really love to go with pillows, that's totally fine. With the collection pieces, we sort of dictate that process a little more, and we've gotten feedback even at this market of like, oh, are you going to introduce a dark green? You know, are you going to introduce this type of color, this type of color? And so we keep track of all of that, obviously. And so as we're planning out our collections, we're able to take that input and try and make it in. But custom side in Atlanta, it's great because we do all the cutting and sewing here. So if there's something you like, then we can quickly knock out, our pillows and weeks and have it out to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the linens are also custom dyed to, how few colors can we use to cover as many of the one-of-a-kind pieces as possible. And that's another decision that's made once we decide on the front facing of the pillow, what linen color we want.
Yeah.
And then zipper.
And the zipper.
Just
and then the little details like a zipper color. Exactly. Well, you guys are the reason why we wanted to start Designer Discovery, because I feel like there are brands like Aloka that are just so unique and so different, and it's important that everybody knows you guys are here. You guys are doing something that you're not going to see every day, and you're not going to see in every showroom, and it's something that I think you guys have built a real niche and a boutique business here that I hope every designer will take the time, if they're here at Highpoint, to come by the Cisco building and meet Monique and Patricia and come see the textiles. And if you're not, hop online, and Aloka has a great website, and you can sign up for a trade account and call. And like I said, they're doing custom work, and they have an amazing collection and one of a kinds. And so definitely, if you don't know Aloka, you need to know Aloka.
AlokaHome.com.
AlokaHome.com, and we can do virtual appointments, and if you're here, we can do appointments in person. Just hop online, and if you go to our Instagram, the link's in our bio, you can sign up for an appointment, and we will be here. So that is the plan for this market.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
That was
much.
great to meet you.
Appreciate it. It was
Yeah,
so nice.
thanks.